Hello and welcome back. Despite its status as a safe haven currency, the US dollar has found itself at the mercy of risk trends lately. Here to discuss this further with me is Valérie Lemaigre from Stigma Partners. Valérie, thank you very much for joining us today. So firstly, what are the reasons do you feel behind this recent devaluation in the dollar?
So what I think is that in the current environment of very low interest rate, the relative liquidity of central bank is really the driving force of the US dollar for the moment. So it's an issue. Both central banks announce some intervention or new operation, but the Federal Reserve is really more generous in the liquidity position that they took. They will provide purchase of 40 billion a month for the mortgage security. And they will also provide, but they did it already in the past, but they continue to provide purchase of treasury for an amount of 45 billion a month. So it's 85 billion a month. And even the Japanese that recently announced the increase of their asset purchase program, they propose an increase of 10 trillion, which is around 128 billion of US dollars. So it's well below the level of the Fed. And finally, the ECB, I mean, they announced to purchase bonds from government that have problems on the bond market, but they will sterilize. So that means that they won't provide the market with new liquidity. So by far, the Fed is more generous in terms of liquidity for the moment, and that's the main reason behind the depreciation of the US dollar.
So this monetary easing is really what's central to the devaluation of the dollar. Yeah,
that's really a key issue. And if we look at the recent quantitative easing of the past quantitative easing of the Fed, when they did it in 2008-9, when they did it in 2012, 10 and 11, that was always, that has a consequence of depreciation of the US dollar in terms of what we call effective exchange rate, nominal effective exchange rate. It was always 10% depreciation, so it has an effect. And even when the ECB introduced this big wave of LTRO, that has the consequence of the depreciation of the euro of around, again, 10% of the effective exchange rate. So I think that for the moment, because of the current environment of very low interest rate, the stability of external price, and meaning currency, is really an issue for central banks.
As I mentioned in the intro to this interview, the US dollar does often find itself at the mercy of risk trends. What, in your view, is impacting sort of market confidence in currencies at present? We often see a similar trend with the Aussie dollar. You know, market sentiment changes and it's felt immediately in the currency market.
Well, the traditional issue of currency is that some currency were really based on confidence indicator, and some other were based on fundamental indicator. I think that what is the heritage of of this financial crisis is that confidence is much more important also for the main currency like the euro, the US dollar, or even the Japanese yen. Why? And I won't go into all the details of that, but in the past, when we were analyzing the fundamentals of our currency, we were focusing on the current account, and the current account was really based on trade flows and so on. Now what we realize is that in the external position of a country, the financial accounts, which mean the portfolio flows, are more and more important in this issue. And that's the reason why we know that portfolio, or they are driven by attractiveness of interest rate, which is not really anymore the case, at least in our country. So the other issue is that the confidence that they have in the government, in the fiscal policy, or even in the potential of company, is starting to be really important for our currency. So I think that confidence factor are starting to be quite important in the driving force of our currency, which was traditionally an issue of emerging market more than our issue.
And lastly, Valérie, if we look at the US dollar against, say, the euro, for example, what are your projections here?
Well, if projection take into account the medium to long term, meaning at least 1 year perspective, then I think that we have to stick to fundamentals like external position of a currency. In this case, what we assess is that the level that is more fundamentals for this bilateral rate is around 135 and not close to 120 as we had a few months ago. So this is a long term and medium-term perspective that really relied on fundamentals. Now we don't have to neglect the short-term factors that could derail, let's say, the position of the currency against its fundamentals and fair value. And in those short-term factors, we have the CDS spread, for example, the CDS evolution, but we have also the liquidity, the relative liquidity of central banks, and this could affect temporarily the currency. But the fundamental level, let's say, of the euro against the US dollar is around 135.
Valérie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
For more technical analysis on the FX currency market, stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for our hourly updates. For now, though, goodbye.